What's up folks? I tried my best, I hope you like it. This is my first YouTube video, so please subscribe. Had the Atlantic been lost, so too would have Britain. There would have been no Mediterranean campaign, no Normandy landings, no victory in Europe or victory over Japan days. The vast, global supply chain upon which the Allies depended would have been cut. And with it the lifeline. Says the historian James Holland. The movie Greyhound being inspired by the often described as the cold, grey, monotonous and miserable Battle of the Atlantic between Allied ships and German submarines, or U-boats. Greyhound is inspired by, rather than directly based on, actual events as the movie's trailer states. Greyhound is based on the Cecil Scott Forster's 1955 novel, The Good Shepherd. Despite being fictional, the novel is deeply researched and noted for its accurate depiction of naval warfare. Set in the winter of 1942, Greyhound is starring Tom Hanks, who also wrote the screenplay, as a newly promoted officer tasked with leading his first transatlantic convoy through a swath of water known as the Black Pit. Krauss must protect his fleet from Nazi U-boats over a 5-day period without air cover. In a true cinematic fashion, unlike the prototypical hero, the captain must battle his own self-doubts and personal demons to be an effective leader of the defenders, while fighting the cold, the relentless night, the brutal sea and his deep fatigue as he chases down the attacking submarines in the deadly game of cat and mouse, with the help of the USS Keeling destroyer, aka Greyhound, and of course not with high-pressure water hoses. As I said before, Greyhound is based on the Battle of the Atlantic, the longest continuous military campaign in World War II, ran from 1939 to the defeat of Nazi Germany in 1945, covering a major part of the naval history of World War II. At its core was the Allied naval blockade of Germany, announced the day after the declaration of war, and Germany's subsequent counter-blockade. The campaign peaked from mid-1940 through to the end of 1943. The Battle of the Atlantic pitted U-boats arranged in teams known as wolfpacks, and other warships of the German Navy and aircraft of the Air Force against the Royal Navy, Royal Canadian Navy, United States Navy, and Allied merchant shipping. Convoys, coming mainly from North America and predominantly going to the United Kingdom and the Soviet Union, were protected for the most part by the British and Canadian navies and air forces. These forces were aided by ships and aircraft of the United States beginning September 13, 1941. The Germans were joined by submarines of the Italian Royal Navy after Germany's Axis ally Italy entered the war on June 10, 1940. As a small island country, the United Kingdom was highly dependent on imported goods. Britain required more than 1 million tons of imported material per week in order to survive and fight. In essence, the Battle of the Atlantic involved a tonnage war, the Allied struggle to supply Britain and the Axis attempt to stem the flow of merchant shipping that enabled Britain to keep fighting. From 1942 onward the Axis also sought to prevent the build-up of Allied supplies and equipment in the British Isles in preparation for the invasion of occupied Europe. The defeat of the U-boat threat was a prerequisite for pushing back the Axis in Western Europe. The outcome of the battle was a strategic victory for the Allies. The German blockade failed, but at great cost. 3,500 merchant ships and 175 warships were sunk in the Atlantic for the loss of 783 U-boats and 47 German surface warships. The Battle of the Atlantic has been called the longest, largest, and most complex naval battle in history. The campaign started immediately after the European War began, during the so-called Phoney War, and lasted more than 5 years, until the German surrender in May 1945. It involved thousands of ships in more than 100 convoy battles and perhaps 1,000 single-ship encounters, in a theater covering millions of square miles of ocean. The situation changed constantly, with one side or the other gaining advantage, as participating countries surrendered, joined and even changed sides in the war, and as new weapons, tactics, countermeasures and equipment were developed by both sides. The Allies gradually gained the upper hand, overcoming German surface raiders by the end of 1942 and defeating the U-boats by mid-1943, though losses due to U-boats continued until the war's end. The Battle of the Atlantic was a cruel and costly campaign that claimed a very high number of casualties on both sides. An estimated 80,000 Allied seamen were lost, while some 28,000 out of 41,000 U-boat crew perished. British Prime Minister Winston Churchill later wrote, "The only thing that really frightened me during the war was the U-boat peril. I was even more anxious about this battle than I had been about the glorious air fight called the Battle of Britain." And the historian Frank Blazich best described the war saying, "If you're a merchant sailor, you don't know if the ship you're on at any moment will suddenly explode. You don't know if it is hit and you have to go in the water, will you be found? And if you're a survivor, you hope to God you get in a lifeboat, and then you hope that somebody picks you up. Otherwise, you're done. And if you ask me, just never travel with Tom Hanks." If you watch the movie, please feel free to comment below and tell us what you think about it, and of course don't forget to subscribe, like or dislike the video. Thanks for watching.